So over to you, George.
Hello everyone. Nice to meet you all, kind of. Um, yeah, so Ray asked me to speak to you guys about my job and my career in football. So currently I'm working as a player care manager at West Ham. So I'm responsible for the welfare of our first team players. And that involves sort of meeting them and introducing them to the club, and helping them settle, which is, a really important job if you think how much clubs spend on their players and the investment that they make. It's important that you take care of the things off the pitch to make that happen. So that involves meeting and greeting them at the meeting process with, technical directors to sell the lifestyle to them, and sell the club to them. It means sourcing visas for them and their families, sourcing properties for them to live in, cars, private bank managers that are well equipped to deal with the wealth of a professional Premier League footballer, and safeguard them in that respect. Um, and then manage the sort of day-to-day football operations with the coaching staff, to ensure that their training schedules are designed and put together in advance, so they know exactly where they're going to be every day of the week, and everything's planned for them. It also involves any sort of logistic around matches. So that could be tickets, the players' lounge. We have a match day staff of probably around sort of 40 people, between sort of catering, and just general staff that sort of work for us in making families feel welcome on a match day, looking after tickets, pointing them in the right direction, showing them to their seats, giving them a VIP experience. Players really value that. And that's obviously another great opportunity for us to sell the club to the players and any prospective guests that they have, and make them, feel proud to be part of the club. And that's really important. Another job within my department is to filter any requests that come through, from sort of fans or commercial partners that we have. Perhaps they want to put the player up for a specific player appearance, which could be a media interview, could be a YouTube interview, could just be a signing session where fans get to come and meet players and get merchandise signed. So yeah, we're involved in a lot of aspects of the first team sort of football wheel, if you like, and all the cogs that go into that wheel to make that happen. And it's becoming a really sort of fundamental area of each Premier League club. And the Premier League as a governing body are making clubs invest more and more. Um, and I think it's mandatory now, at academy level for all Category 1 academies to have a player care staff member within their club to achieve Category A status. And then obviously I work first team level where I think there's at least 2 to 3 player care members of staff in every Premier League club. So it's a really sort of new area of football, but it's really important, if you're spending millions of pounds on players and you want them to settle quick and perform well on the pitch. So it's a really interesting job. No day's the same. Um, so yeah, um, be happy to take any questions that you have to learn more about player care and what the role is. Um, Ray also told me to speak to you guys about what it takes to be a first team player, as obviously I've seen that firsthand. I've seen academy players come all the way up into the first team, and learn from seeing the professionals and copy their habits. And I've also seen it go the other way when players don't sort of survive in that first team environment because they don't do all the things that you need to do to become a top level professional. So yeah, be really happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so guys, if you want to start messaging in on the group chat so that we can see the questions, and we'll start going from there. So I'll just wait for them to. So who's going
One
to be
of
first in for questions?
One of the first questions a lot of people ask me is, what are players like, what are their personalities like, and often I have to remind people that they're just normal humans like everyone else. Yeah, they're being paid a lot of money, and they're doing the job that all of us would love to do, but they still have the human element. They still have disappointments on a day-to-day basis. They still have family issues. They still have to make sacrifices. Nothing comes easy for them. Even despite the big salary, they still have good days and bad days. And I guess that's how they become the players that they are, is being able to deal with that. So first question that's come in, how do players adapt with a pro team? Um, I think initially when we see academy players come through into the first team environment is maybe just initially coping with the demand of the level that you're coming into. Um, so that could be like how intense training is. It could be how intense the schedules are for a first team environment. A young player coming into the first team could be traveling 2, 3 times a week, getting on aeroplanes, long coach journeys, um, really intense training sessions, 2, 3 days before a game, which you might not expect at under 18 level or under 21 level. So physically there's demands, mentally there's demands to take on sort of instructions and tactics at a really high level. So I guess for a young player, it's adapting to those demands. Um, and I guess a really, really big thing is obviously the pressure from fans, both in the stadium and on social media. You could have a player with, just a couple thousand followers playing at under 18 level. All of a sudden, there's an injury in the first team. They get called up to the first team. They do really well, and then they're interviewed on Sky Sports or something like that. And all of a sudden, every fan wants to follow them. They're getting messages on Instagram or Twitter, good and bad. So that's another demand is social media. Um, how many hours do they train, and do they do extra in that own time? That's a great question. So typically, players have to report for training at 10 o'clock, and breakfast would be available from around 8 a.m. So most players arrive between 9 and 10 to have their breakfast. They'll normally have like massages and do sort of strength and conditioning around sort of 10:30, and stretching and their own sort of physical needs around 10:30. And then around 10:45, they might have a quick meeting, like a tactical meeting. And then 11 o'clock, it's in the gym for sort of team activation. So like a team warm up inside the gym. Then after about 15 minutes, they'll put their boots on, and then they'll do a team warm up. That's usually around 15 minutes. And then an actual football training session can last between 60 to 90 minutes. So yeah, about an hour and a half football session. And then after they split or finish as a team, maybe, defenders might work on something specific, or attackers will do some extra shooting, or keepers, or individuals will split off to do different things. But once we get into the thick of the season, you don't tend to see that as much because of the amount of games they're playing, and they're training a lot. Typically, we probably train sort of 6 days a week. Um, and when we was in Europe, sometimes there wasn't even times for days off at all. So that sort of time to do extra training sort of reduces because they're then recovering. And then post training, you'll find that pretty much 99% of the squad I don't really know any players at the moment that we have that don't utilize all the sports science that's available to them and facilities. So that's massages, that's saunas, that's ice plunges, that's compression machines, um, um, hot pools, hydrotherapy, you name it, osteopaths. We have everything available for them for their recovery. So post training, they'll they'll do sort of individual stuff for whatever it is that they need on that particular week, or if they've got a particular injury. We've got a medical team of probably a staff around 15 to 20, from physios, fitness coaches, doctors, who can obviously give them everything that they need to maximize their performance. So, they're really dedicated level professionals. How do you deal with not getting enough game time when you're training? So one thing they do is monitor the amount of kilometers players run. So if a player's not playing in a match, post game they'll have to hit a certain amount of kilometers and speed levels, to ensure that they're topping up their fitness, and that'll be monitored on training days as well. So if perhaps they see a player hasn't hit the sort of kilometers that they need, they'll make them run extra. And also we'll have situations where particularly younger players, maybe they're not getting the game time they need at first team level because they're only 18, 19. They'll typically top up their matches with our under 21 team, which is kind of like our B team, and our development team, for younger players. If you receive a contract in Europe, do you have a time period to move there? Um, so typically, you'll find that most clubs, once they sign a player and they begin an employment contract with them, they need to start straight away. So often, um, if it's a player outside of Europe and they don't have the right visa, it means that they'll need to go to a country where they can get that visa. So, for example, we had a player from Morocco before that was signing for West Ham. I went to Paris to meet him and his family. We did the medical in Paris, we did the visa application in Paris, and then we travelled to London to complete his official West Ham contract. And then he could then begin work. So I would say almost straight away. But sometimes you have instances where you'll sign a young player and send them straight back out on loan. So for example, West Ham, we signed a player this summer from Paris, but he was only 17, and we've loaned him straight back to the club that we bought him from. So he's on loan, a club in Paris. So in that situation, he won't be moving to London for at least a year. What's the youngest player you've seen come through the academy to the main team? Um, at West Ham, I've been here since 2021. I've seen 17-year-olds make their debut. I've seen 18-year-olds make their debut. We've got quite a famous academy for producing young players. And most recently, the last game of last season, we had an 18-year-old come on as a substitute and score in our final match of the season. So yeah, scoring a Premier League goal at just 18, which is really young. And he's now been sent on loan to a club in the Championship, so the second division in the UK, so one below the Premier League, to kind of continue his development in a first team professional environment, where perhaps at West Ham his opportunities would be limited. Um, One of the questions here, you mentioned some players don't make the cut once they make it pro. What kind of things did these players have in common? What did they lack? Um, I would say one of the things that I've seen in the professional level, the players that didn't make it, is perhaps they didn't maximize the opportunities that were available to them. Um, Now that can mean on the pitch, but also off the pitch. For example, if you're sort of 18 years old and you're training with the first team every day, and you're traveling with the first team every day, you're staying in the hotels with the first team, you need to maximize everything. So if you can learn from coaches by listening to them off the pitch, about tactical instructions, tactical meetings. If you're 18 years old and you're away at a hotel with the first team, you need to be making sure you're resting, you're recovering, you're going to bed early. you're eating the right things. Yeah, it's amazing you're in the first team environment, but you're not on holiday. And I think some players can maybe take for granted that they've been called up to the first team and think, wow, that's it now. I'm going to be the first team and this is going to come easy to me. But actually, you need to prove yourself every day in training. Um, so that means, listening to tactical instructions. It means working hard in the warm up. It means working hard in the session. It means if you make a mistake, forgetting about it and trying even harder. Because what other first team players will want to see is that you're a good young player that's coming to work hard. You're a good listener. You're a good teammate. You're likable. And then if you've got the ability and you do all those things, then you give yourself a chance. If you turn up late, um, if you think that the hotel buffet food is there for you as a holiday style buffet and not actually there to fuel your performance, you can suddenly get carried away. And learn from other players, ask questions, be polite. Watch what they do in training, watch what they do after training, ask to do extras, ask coaches to help work on your weaknesses, ask for feedback. What is it that you can improve on? Just take on board everything. So just to answer the question specifically, what kind of things do they lack in common? Being self-aware, not being dedicated enough, and not seizing the moment, both on the pitch and off the pitch. What is the biggest challenge you see footballers face? I would guess a thing that's really topical at the moment is the amount of matches they play. So the last 3 seasons West Ham have been in Europe, we're playing, I would say, sort of around 50, 60 matches a season, which is a lot for players. So that means a lot of training, a lot of demand on the body. Um, and that can have its physical toll, it can have its mental toll, because you're playing so many matches. It's trying to be your best for that many matches can be difficult, especially the level is so high. So the amount of money that Premier League clubs can spend and the players that they can buy makes the level so high. So for a club like West Ham to expect the players to be performing sort of 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 every match is really difficult. So I'd say biggest challenge players face at West Ham is the physical and mental demands due to the amount of matches we play. Really like this question. It says your job sounds interesting. What kind of background does someone need who might want to look at this as a job in the future? Um, so I studied exercise science at university, and originally wanted to be either a fitness coach or a football coach, soccer coach. But upon graduating, I looked at sort of more operational jobs and the business side of football. Um, and I just started to network. Networking was really important. I started to research a lot about player care in the industry and educated myself and networked with people in the industry already. Um, and once I had a network of people already working in the industry, I reached out to them for advice. And the person I spoke to at the time was working at Southampton, but he was about to leave to go to West Ham. And he stayed in touch with me. And when a job became available at West Ham, and originally it was just a match day job. So I just worked in the players' lounge, helping managing the ticketing process for players. And I did that for 2 seasons. After that, a full-time job become available, and because of my experience already in the club, they was able to offer it to me. So that was great. How does a new player build rapport with his new teammates? This is something I see a lot, as obviously one of my jobs is to help players settle. And I think it's just showing an interest in players, but also staff, because players will take note of that and show that you're polite, you're interested, you're taking an interest in them and others. Um, and you'll find that most Premier League clubs and the training ground environment, is really tailored to help players succeed as much as possible. So, they'll be given every opportunity to feel welcome within the group, and clubs like West Ham, we do sort of team dinners and team social occasions to integrate families and the players. So I guess as a new player, it would be to show an interest in your teammates, and they'll hopefully take care of the rest. We obviously have a lot of foreign players come, and I think when you're a foreign player at first, it can be quite daunting. But then once you've gone through that transition and you see new players arrive, you feel that sense of responsibility to look after them in the same way others did for you. Um, how do you keep your mentality in the right place when moving from your club to an overseas team? Um, I think the biggest thing would be to do your research on where you're moving to. Football can move really quick, so perhaps you don't always get the chance to. But if your agent or your coach is presenting opportunities, do your research on that city or that town of where that club is. Research the culture, the language, um, and also understand and be realistic of the task that's presenting itself. If you're moving to Manchester United, obviously expect that you'll have higher competition for places, and you might not get the playing time that you want. And understand the process as a young player of what you need to go through for your development before you reach the sort of first team level. I'd say if you're already an established first team player, then similar applies. Understand the club that you're going to, what your game time is going to be like, what the culture is going to be like, so that there's no shocks when you arrive. And also resilience. Resilience is a huge thing in football, whether you're a 16-year-old, sort of still in your development stage, or you're a 30-year-old moving to a new club. Sometimes things don't go right. Injuries can happen. You can be homesick. The coach might not be playing you initially. If a striker, you might not score for 4 games, but it's actually having that resilience to believe in yourself and keep going, even if you have a setback. What type of training do the centre backs do? Um, so it'll be all different types of training, tactical training, a lot of tactical and set piece training, and video footage, reviewing how they did in the match and working together as a back four, and also centre backs will do a lot of work on how to play out from the back and play against different systems. They'll also do a lot of work in the gym, and in particular their core strength. What type of training do coaches make players do for specific positions? So I'll give you a quick example. Perhaps if they're doing a shooting practice, you might typically see some build-up play with some centre midfielders, making it match realistic. And then it'll be wingers doing the crossing, strikers doing the finish inside the box. So I'm always making it realistic. Um, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for centre backs to be doing sort of shooting practice from crosses in open play, perhaps from set pieces, but realistically, how often is a centre back going to be running into the box in open play? So make all the training realistic. I don't know what positions you're referring to, but I think it would depend on the strength of the player as well and what they need to improve on. Just something that's come into my mind is I remember there was a young player that broke into the first team, and he's a good player, but I remember the coaches wanted him to play forwards more, so they would design extra training for him to practice turning and playing forwards into a striker's feet. So I hope that gives you a quick example. How does the team confidence stay up after a loss? Um, I think there's always another, excuse me, there's always another match. So immediately after a loss, the team might review it as a team via video footage, or a coach might sit down with a player one-on-one to show a mistake to them or show a series of clips to them to illustrate a point. But then after that, the attention and focus turns to your next match, and you'll be doing training based on that, reviewing that. Coach might have a one-on-one chat with you. That's something I see a lot, where a coach pulls the player for a quick chat to just talk about the previous game or what they expect from them from an upcoming game. But I think when you reach Premier League level and you're a first team player, um, you'll have intrinsic sort of motivation and confidence which you develop by yourself, and that gets them where they are in the first place. And it always amazes me, even in game, when perhaps you're away at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and there's 60,000 fans singing because Tottenham are 1-0 up. But the players have the mental strength and resilience to play through a difficult moment within a match, and sometimes turn that around and win big matches. The reason I say that is because I remember last season we were 1-0 down at Tottenham. And I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to go to that stadium, but it's amazing. And the fans, when they all sing, it's quite loud. And we ended up winning 3-1. And I remember there was a period where two, three players just really raised their level in a difficult moment in the match. So I think for any young player, just take on board that resilience. Individual player match analysis. I'm from New Zealand. We do not have that provided here at my football club. How can I develop my footballing ability without it? Um, you don't necessarily need video footage. You could ask a coach to give you some detailed feedback, just subjectively from what they've seen about your game. I used to be a college athlete in America. I was on a soccer scholarship, and that was something we used to do. A coach would say, for example, if I was a striker, give me feedback on how I held the ball up, how I pressed opposition defenders, how many times did I run in the box, how many shots did I have, am I getting in positions to shoot, am I taking too many touches? Just ask them to give you sort of subjective feedback if you don't have video footage available. What would you recommend the player to prioritize more on a week where they have no match, training, or rest? What would you recommend a player to prioritize more on a week where they have no match, training, or rest? I would say training, absolutely, especially if you're a young player. There's no excuse not to be training. Every day doesn't need to be, a 10K intense training session. But perhaps if you're a left-footed player, you could work on your right-footed crossing. If you're a right-footed player, you can work on your left-footed crossing or shooting. Even just one-on-one training, bouncing the ball to a wall and back, testing your first touch, testing your passing, designing yourself your own personal training drills to dribble in and out of cones, work on your fitness. All young players, you should have a training diary. You should record all things that you can do. Record all, your 5K running times, your 3K running times, your 1K running times. If you're 9 years old, start writing down how many joggles you can do. Write down when you're 12, write them down when you're 14. Write all your training down that you do so you can look back and monitor progress. What sort of training do they do in the off season? So off season is typically a time for rest, but they will know that they have 3 weeks of rest and then they'll be back in for pre-season. So they don't want to fall behind. So they'll be number one, monitoring their weight and their calories, because they don't want to come back overweight. And obviously a big way to do that and enjoy themselves in the off season is still to train. That might be more hypertrophy sessions in the gym. It might be sort of yoga sessions in the gym, core sessions. So yeah, just utilizing the gym and cardio where they're not sort of overdoing it, but making sure they're ready for pre-season. What meals that footballers eat before a game or before training? So typically before training, players eat breakfast. So that will look like fruit and porridge. That would be like an omelette, either a vegetable omelette or ham and cheese omelette, whole grain toast. manuka honey. Some players have quite a light breakfast. They might just have like one egg on toast. Um, so it can vary player to player. Some players are have higher mass and higher volume, so they can afford to eat more calories before training. So yeah, it depends on the player. Before a match, I've seen varied different pre-match meals. I've seen beans on toast. I've seen spaghetti bolognese, chicken and pasta, fish and rice. Also depends on the time of kickoff. 12:30 kickoff. Sometimes you might see players still eat fish and rice. Other players might prefer to have porridge. But we always, for an actual match, eat a pre-match meal 3.5 hours before kickoff. So for young players who are listening to this, I'd say that is one of the biggest things. Make sure that you just time your meals right and find a meal that gives you energy and feels right for you. What kind of fullback aim to do in team training and training on their own? I guess for a fullback, think about the things that you're judged on, how many times you play forward into your right winger or left winger or striker, how many crosses you put in the box, how many times have you let crosses in against you, how many times have you managed to stop crosses, obviously clean sheets, how many overlapping runs you've made into the opposition half, um, how many times did you give the ball away? Um, there would be things that I would be looking at in team training and individual training. Same applies. What is the team's training schedule and intensity like? So I've worked under different managers that structure their training differently, but typically most managers will work back from a match. So if they've got a match, they'll either do a 3 or 4 day build up into a match. So you might hear the terms like match day -1, -2, -3. So that means like 3 days out, you're preparing for a training session. 4 days out, you're preparing a training session for that match. And in terms of intensity, I would say match day -4, 3 and 2 are very intense. And then typically the day before training is more tactical, where you go over the team shape and tactics for the match the next day, or set pieces. You may even find if we train in the evening, managers like to do a very light session the day of a game, where they might walk around the pitch or jog around the pitch, do some stretching, and then do set pieces just to break the day up so you're not spending all day at a hotel. The USA has a tendency to lean heavily on height, regardless of how skilled a player may be. Does the UK have the same prejudgments, and can someone of smaller stature still achieve their goals within the UK football system? I'd say, unfortunately, in the UK, we still have a little bit of that mindset, um, and maybe smaller players are not appreciated as much, or it's harder for them to get through into the first team levels. I would say find a club or a coach or an environment that believes in you as a player, even if you are a bit smaller. Um, a famous example in England is Alex Ferguson with Paul Scholes and Jesse Lingard more recently, where the club allowed that player to have a bit more time to develop until they were like 21, 22, because they were obviously a little bit smaller, but it meant that by the time they were 21, 22, that was going to be as physically strong as they was going to get, but give them a chance to also develop their technical ability. So I think I think players like that can still get through into first team level and achieve their goals, like your question's saying. But you need to find an environment that suits you and where you have a coach that believes in you. And have the resilience to go through difficult times. If you're not playing, make the most of your training sessions. If you're only getting 10, 15 minutes in a match, make the most of that 10, 15 minutes if that's all that you've got. And train yourself as a player to make that work for you. Um, if you know you're only going to be a sub most games, then be the best sub you can be. What is the most effective way to assess yourself? Um, that's quite a difficult question. I think it depends on how realistic you are. I guess listen to feedback from people that you really appreciate their opinion, so close family or friends or coaches, and from your own opinion as well. Ask yourself what do you really think. Um, and compare yourself to other players that you like and things you see, um, and also physical data if there's anything available. If you think you're the quickest player in your team, time yourself against other players. If you think you're the fittest, can you run the furthest and the fastest? That might help evaluate yourself. What drills do defenders do to improve their heading ability? Um, so in the UK, we're kind of trying to come away from heading so much in training, due to certain incidents around studies of dementia. So I think it depends on the age of the player, but I don't think we do head in until you're about 12 now in the UK, both in academies and amateur level, and at first team level. I know they will train heading, um, but they'll definitely limit how much heading they do, because of the recent studies on heading and dementia. Um, but I don't think that it's been really outlined to clubs exactly what the um, potential damages are. So I'm not saying that to scare you. I think clubs have just done it as a precaution. Um, but I think basic things is defending crosses, attacking crosses, and just being brave enough at times to head the ball.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all of our questions. Thank you so much, George, for coming on and going through that. You've given the team a lot of things to think about and great resources there to learn from as well. So we do really appreciate you jumping on for us.
No worries at all. I hope I could be of interest to all of you. Thank you for your questions, and feel free to reach out to Ray if you have any other more specific questions. Always be happy to help out.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to turn off now and get ready for the silly season, I guess. So thank you so much for jumping on, and we really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys. All the best in your football and soccer.
Okay, see you guys. Bye.